Chapter 1. The Invitation. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, its edges crisp despite the drizzle that clung to St. Mary Mead. Miss Marple set her knitting aside, her fingers brushing the heavy cream paper. No ordinary post this. Gold ink gleamed under the lamplight, spelling her name with a flourish she hadn't seen since the old days. Blackthorn Manor, she murmured, tracing the address. A masquerade ball. Tomorrow night. The invitation bore no signature, only a wax seal pressed with a thorned rose. Curious, that. She tilted it toward the fire. The wax glistened, almost alive. Jane Marple, it read, your presence is requested. A night of mystery awaits. Mystery indeed. She hadn't known the Blackthorn family long, newcomers to the county, flushed with wealth and whispers, but their invitations weren't the sort one declined, not without reason. The village had buzzed about the ball for weeks. Masks, they said, costumes, a grand affair to rival the old gaolers at Chipping Cleghorn. Yet something tugged at her, faint as a thread caught on a thorn. The postmark was smudged, posted late perhaps, or deliberately obscured. She rose, the floorboards creaking under her slippers, and crossed to the window. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the garden beyond. A shadow flickered. Only the wind, surely, tossing the roses about. Still her lips pursed. Blackthorn Manor was a good hour's drive, and she'd need to ring Mrs. Bantry for a lift. Dolly would fuss, of course, but she'd come. Miss Marple returned to the envelope. A smaller card slipped free, unnoticed till now. Black ink this time, stark against the cream. Wear a mask, it instructed, and trust no one. Her eyebrows lifted. Theatrical, yes, but the words lingered like damp in the air. She set the cards on the mantel beside the little porcelain shepherdess. Tomorrow, then. A ball where every face would hide. She smiled faintly. People thought masks concealed things. In her experience, they revealed far more. Chapter 2. The Masks Arrive. The gravel crunched under the tires as Mrs. Bantry's car rolled up Blackthorn Manor's drive. Miss Marple adjusted the feathered mask across her eyes. Simple, grey, a sparrow among peacocks. The manor loomed ahead, its windows aglow against the dusk. Gargoyles perched on the eaves, their stone grins sharp in the fading light. Positively Gothic, Mrs. Bantry said, her voice bright as she fussed with a sequined domino mask. I do hope there's champagne. Miss Marple smiled thinly. I expect there'll be more than that, Dolly. They stepped into the grand hall, a swirl of silk and shadow. Guests milled beneath a chandelier that dripped crystal like frozen tears. Masks everywhere. Gold lions, silver moons, a fox with emerald eyes. Laughter rose, brittle as glass, and the air carried a tang of perfume and wax. She paused by the staircase. A man in a black velvet cape brushed past, his mask a skull with hollow sockets. His gloved hand gripped a cane too tightly, knuckles pale through the leather. Nervous, perhaps, or angry, she filed it away. Miss Marple! A voice cut through the din. Lady Evelyn Blackthorn swept forward, her gown a cascade of midnight blue, her mask adorned with sapphire feathers. I wasn't sure you'd come. Nor was I, Miss Marple replied, her tone mild. Your invitation was intriguing. Lady Evelyn's laugh was a quick, sharp note. Oh, we do like a touch of drama. Come, Meet the others. She gestured toward the crowd, but her fingers twitched against her fan. A small thing, easily missed. The ballroom opened before them, vast and gilded. A woman in a crimson mask swayed near the orchestra, her laughter too loud. A tall figure in green velvet lingered by the fireplace, staring into the flames. And there, a girl, barely 20, in white lace, clutching a glass that trembled in her hand. Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the far wall. A portrait hung there, half lit. A man, stern-faced, with the same sharp jaw as Lady Evelyn. The late Lord Blackthorn, no doubt. His eyes seemed to follow the room. "Quite a gathering," Mrs. Bantry whispered. "Who's that in the green?" "One's introduced themselves yet," Miss Marple said softly. "But they will." A servant passed, offering wine. She declined with a nod, her eyes on the girl in white. The glass tipped slightly, a drop spilling onto her glove. Clumsiness or fear? The masks hid faces, but not the little things. Never those. The music swelled, a waltz curling through the air. Couples paired off, shadows twisting across the floor. Miss Marple stayed still, a quiet sparrow watching the feathers flare. Chapter 3. The Midnight Waltz. The clock struck midnight, its chimes slicing through the waltz. Miss Marple stood near the refreshment table, her fingers resting lightly on the azure edge. The room spun with colour, silks rustling, masks glinting, but her eyes lingered on the girl in white lace. She'd moved to the terrace doors, her steps unsteady, glass still in hand. A sudden scream tore the air. The music faltered, strings scraping to a halt. Guests turned, masks tilting like curious birds. Miss Marple didn't move. She'd seen it first, the figure in black velvet, the skull-masked man from the stairs, crumpling to the floor. His cane clattered, rolling toward the hearth. A wine-glass tipped from his hand, spilling red across the polished wood. Mrs. Bantry clutched her arm. "Good heavens, Jane!" "Hush, Dolly," Miss Marple murmured. She stepped forward, skirting a woman in gold who gasped too loudly. The crowd pressed in, a murmur rising like wind through dry leaves. Lady Evelyn pushed through, her sapphire mask askew. "Stand back! Give him air!" Her voice cracked, sharp as a snapped twig. She knelt beside the man, fan discarded, hands hovering but not touching. Miss Marple edged closer. The wine pooled dark and thick, too dark. She bent slightly, her nose catching a faint bitterness beneath the cloying fruit. Not just wine, then. Her gaze flicked to the man's mask, still in place, hollow eyes staring upward. His chest didn't rise. "He's dead," someone whispered. The girl in white swayed, her glass slipping to shatter on the floor. Shards glittered like ice. "Call a doctor!" Lady Evelyn snapped, though her tone wavered. No one moved. The air grew heavy, the chandelier's light flickering as if uncertain. Miss Marple straightened. The cane lay near the fire, its silver, tip gleaming. A scratch marred it, fresh, deep. She glanced at the spilled wine again. The stain crept toward a rug, its edge curling slightly. Something beneath it? Too soon to say. "Who is he?" a man in a fox mask demanded, his voice tight. "No one's unmasked yet," Lady Evelyn said, rising. Her hands smoothed her gown, but the tremor lingered. "We'll sort this out. Please, everyone, into the drawing-room." The crowd shuffled reluctant. Miss Marple lingered, her eyes on the terrace doors. The girl in white had vanished in the chaos. A breeze slipped through, tugging at the curtains. Outside, the night swallowed everything. She turned back to the body. One glove had slipped, revealing a thin scar across the knuckles. Familiar somehow. Like old Mr. Grayson's hands, the gardener from years back. But this wasn't him. Not here, Jane? Mrs. Bantry hovered, her sequins catching the light. "What's happened?" Miss Marple's lips pressed into a line. "A dance ended too soon, Dolly, and I suspect it's only the first. Chapter 4, The Unseen Clue." The drawing-room hummed with unease, guests pressed shoulder to shoulder like moths around a flame. Miss Marple stood near a bookcase, its shelves heavy with leather spines and dust. The air smelled of cigar smoke and nerves. She adjusted her mask, the feathers brushing her cheek, and watched. Lady Evelyn paced by the fireplace, her sapphire feathers trembling. "A doctor's coming," she said, though no one had seen a telephone lifted. "And the police, I suppose. We'll get to the bottom of this." Bottom of what? The man in the fox mask leaned against the wall, arms crossed. A man drops dead. Could be his heart. Happens all the time. Does it? Miss Marple's voice was soft, a thread in the clamour. Heads turned. She stepped forward, her slippers silent on the rug. "His wine spilled rather oddly, didn't it?" The room stilled. Lady Evelyn's fan snapped shut. "What do you mean, Miss Marple?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she drifted toward the ballroom doors, still ajar. The body lay beyond, untouched, the wine stain now a dull smear. She crouched, slowly, mindful of her knees, and peered at the glass. Shattered at the base, yes, but a faint residue clung to the rim. Bitter, she'd wager. Like almonds, perhaps. Her eyes slid to the cane. That scratch again, jagged, fresh. She reached out, not quite touching, and noted the rug's curl. A tiny thread poked free, snagged on something beneath. She rose, brushing her hands together. "Jane, you'll catch your death hovering there." Mrs. Bantry huffed, bustling over. "What are you staring at?" "The little things, Dolly." Miss Marple turned, her gaze catching the woman in crimson near the window. She'd been quiet since the scream, her mask tilted as if listening. A ribbon dangled from her sleeve, black, torn at the edge. "Did anyone know him?" the man in green velvet asked, his voice low. He'd moved from the fireplace, his gloved hands clasped tight. "The skull fellow, I mean." No one spoke. Masks shifted, eyes darting. Miss Marple tilted her head. "Someone did, I think. Gloves don't hide everything." The girl in white slipped in then, her lace mask smudged with damp. She'd been outside, her hem carried mud, faint but there. I needed air," she stammered, shrinking under the stairs. "Of course, dear," Miss Marple said gently. She didn't press, not yet. But the ribbon, the cane, the wine, they whispered, to her, a pattern half-formed, like the time young Tommy Pierce broke the vicar's window and blamed the wind. She glanced at the portrait above the mantel. Lord Blackthorn's stern face glared down. The scar on the dead man's hand nagged at her again. Familiar, yes. But from where? A distant siren wailed, cutting the silence. The police, at last! Miss Marple stepped back, a sparrow among the chaos. The clues were there, tucked into the shadows. She'd find them soon enough. Chapter 5. Whispers Behind the Masks. The police arrived with a clatter. Boots on marble, voices barking orders. Miss Marple slipped to a corner of the drawing-room, her grey mask blending with the curtains. A young constable cordoned off the ballroom, while an inspector with a bristling moustache took Lady Evelyn aside. The guests buzzed, their whispers sharp as pins. She watched the girl in white lace sink into a chair, her hands twisting in her lap. Mud still clung to her hem, drying now. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. The terrace led to the gardens. Wet, tangled, easy to lose something in. Or hide it. Never seen him before. The man in the fox mask muttered nearby, loud enough to carry. He flicked a cigarette case open, then shut it again. Skull mask or no, he's a stranger. Perhaps, Miss Marple said mildly. He jolted, not expecting her there. But strangers don't always stay strange. He snorted, turning away. She didn't mind. His left shoe tapped, a quick, uneven rhythm. Restless or guilty. Across the room, the woman in crimson leaned toward the man in green velvet. "It's ghastly," she said, her voice a low purr. "Who'd do such a thing here?" Her fingers brushed his arm, lingering. He pulled back, stiff as a board. "Someone bold," he replied, barely audible or desperate. His gloves creaked as his fists tightened. Miss Marple tilted her head. Boldness or desperation, both fit. She drifted closer to the fireplace, where Lady Evelyn stood with the inspector. Her fan lay forgotten on the mantel, one feather bent. "No idea who he was," Lady Evelyn was saying, her tone clipped. "Guests were told to come masked. It's the point of the evening." The inspector grunted. "Convenient for a killer, that." She flinched, just a flicker. Miss Marple's gaze dropped to the fan. A tiny smear of wax clung to its edge, red like the seal on her invitation. "Curious. Did he carry anything?" she asked, her voice cutting through like a soft breeze. The inspector turned, frowning. "Pockets were empty, ma'am. No wallet, no papers, no cane either," she mused. "It's still out there, I suppose." He blinked, then nodded. "By the body, yes. Why?" She smiled faintly. "Oh, no reason. Just the little things." Lady Evelyn's lips thinned, but she said nothing. The room shifted again. The girl, in white, stood abruptly, murmuring about a headache. She slipped toward the hall, her steps too quick. The woman in crimson watched her go, eyes sharp behind her mask. Miss Marple stayed still, the fire's warmth seeping into her shawl. Whispers wove around her, grudges, lies, half-truths. Like the time Mrs. Elspeth gossiped about the baker's wife, only to miss the real scandal brewing next door. People said too much and not enough. The scar on the dead man's hand flickered, in her mind. Old, faded, a gardener's hands or a soldier's? She'd ask Dolly later. For now, the masks spoke louder than words. Chapter 6. The Locked Room. The drawing-room grew stifling, the air thick with murmurs and the inspector's tobacco. Miss Marple slipped out, her slippers whispering against the floor. The hall stretched, dim and cool, portraits lining the walls like silent sentinels. She paused by a door. Oak, heavy, its brass knob cold under her fingers. A faint draught seeped from beneath. She turned it. Locked. Odd that. The rest of the manor buzzed with chaos, yet this room stayed shut. She bent slightly, peering at the keyhole. No light leaked through. Something blocked it. A key left inside, perhaps. Footsteps echoed behind her. She straightened, turning to find the man in green velvet, his mask glinting in the sconce's glow. He stopped short, gloves flexing. Lost, are we? His voice was smooth but tight at the edges. Not quite, Miss Marple replied, her tone mild. Just curious. This door's locked, you see. He shrugged too quick. Servants' quarters, probably. Nothing worth snooping for. She smiled faintly. Oh, I wouldn't dream of snooping. Her eyes flicked to his boots, polished, but a speck of mud clung to the heel, fresh like the girl's hem. He shifted, then moved past her toward the stairs. She watched him go, his stride clipped. A feather drifted from his sleeve, white, delicate. It settled on the rug, stark against the crimson weave. Miss Marple knelt, picking it up between two fingers. Soft, like a swan's, or a costume's, trim. She tucked it into her sleeve and turned back to the door. A faint scratch marked the frame, barely a nick. Something sharp had grazed it. A pin. A blade. She stepped back, her mind humming. The dead man's cane had a scratch too. Coincidence, perhaps. Or not. She'd seen a locked room before. Old Mr. Hargreaves, hiding his tax papers from the vicar. But this felt heavier. Darker. A shout rose from the drawing room. The inspector barking at someone. She glanced that way, then back at the door. The girl in white had slipped out earlier, and now this. A thread tugged loose in her thoughts. Dolly, she murmured, turning toward the clamour. Mrs. Bantry would know if Blackthorn Manor had secrets, worth locking away. But first, that feather, and the mud. Little things, yes, but they piled up like leaves in a storm. The hall grew quiet again, the draught curling around her ankles. She didn't try the door a second time. Not yet. The lock would wait, but it wouldn't stay silent forever. Chapter 7. The Lady in Red. The drawing-room doors swung shut behind her, muffling the inspector's gruff voice. Miss Marple drifted toward the terrace, where the night pressed against the glass. A flicker of crimson caught her eye. The woman in the red mask stood alone, her silhouette sharp against the moonlit panes. Smoke curled from a cigarette between her fingers, faint and bitter. Miss Marple stepped outside, the air cool and damp on her face. The woman didn't turn, but her shoulders stiffened, the ribbon on her sleeve swaying slightly. Torn still, black, against the scarlet. Chilly for standing about, Miss Marple said, her tone light. She pulled her shawl tighter, the wool soft under her fingers. The woman exhaled, smoke twisting upward. Needed a moment. All that fuss inside, it's suffocating. Her voice dipped, a nervous trill beneath the calm. Quite a shock, yes. Miss Marple paused, her eyes on the cigarette's glow. You were near him, weren't you? Before he fell. The woman's head snapped round, her mask's edges glinting. I danced with half the room. Doesn't mean I saw anything. A teared insane laugh came too fast, cracking like thin ice. Miss Marple nodded as if agreeing. Of course, masks make it tricky, don't they? She stepped closer, the terrace stones slick under her slippers. A faint scent lingered. Perfume, yes, but something sharper beneath, like the wine's edge. The woman flicked ash into the dark. "You're that Marple woman, aren't you? Always poking about, they say." "Oh, I wouldn't say poking." Miss Marple's smile was small, untroubled. "Just noticing. That ribbon, for instance, it's a pity it tore." The woman's hand jerked, brushing the sleeve. "Caught it on a chair. Clumsy of me." Her tone hardened, but her fingers lingered, pressing the fabric. Miss Marple glanced past her, toward the garden. Shadows stretched long and jagged, the rose bushes swaying faintly. The girl in white had come this way. Mud proved that, and now this ribbon, snagged like a clue left dangling. "Did you know him?" she asked, soft as a breath. "The man in the skull mask?" The woman's cigarette paused mid-air. "No." A beat too late. "Why would I?" She turned, her mask, catching the light, eyes wide, then narrow. "No reason," Miss Marple said gently. "Only he seemed familiar to someone." The woman stubbed the cigarette against the railing, sparks flaring briefly. "You see too much, old lady." She brushed past, her gown rustling like dry leaves, and vanished into the manor. Miss Marple stayed, the night settling around her. The ribbon nagged, a match to the rug's thread, perhaps, and that laugh, too brittle to trust. She'd seen nerves like that before. Young Elsie, caught stealing jam, all giggles and denials. A twig snapped in the garden. She turned, but the shadows held their secrets. For now. Chapter 8. A Dance of Deception. The drawing-room crackled with voices as Miss Marple slipped back inside. The inspector stood by the fireplace, notebook in hand, barking questions at the man in the fox mask. Guests hovered like moths, masks tilted, eyes darting. She edged toward Mrs. Bantry, who clutched a sherry glass near the sofa. "Jane, where have you been?" Mrs. Bantry hissed, her sequins winking. "They're saying it's poison." "Are they?" Miss Marple's tone stayed soft. She glanced at the inspector, then at the man in green velvet lurking by the window. His gloves gleamed, spotless, now, no mud. The fox-masked man raised his voice. "I didn't pour his drink. Why would I? I don't even know the fellow." His cigarette case clicked open again, then shut. "No one's accusing you," the inspector growled. "Yet, where were you when he dropped? Dancing. With her." He jerked his head toward the woman in crimson, who just swept in from the terrace, her mask tilted, lips tight. "Me?" She laughed, sharp and short. "Hardly. I was by the punch bowl. Ask anyone." The girl in white flinched, her lace mask slipping slightly. I didn't see," she stammered, shrinking into her chair. Mud flaked from her hem onto the rug. Miss Marple watched the silences. The foxman's tapping foot, the crimson woman's fingers brushing her torn ribbon, the green man's stillness. Too still. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through like a needle. "Was the punch near? The wine, then?" she asked, mild as ever. The woman froze. "What?" "The punch bowl," Miss Marple repeated. "It's just over there, by the ballroom doors, close to where he fell." The inspector turned, moustache bristling. "You saying something, ma'am?" "Only noticing." She smiled faintly. "Things get muddled in a crowd." The man in green spoke up, his voice low. "She's right. Too many hands about. Anyone could have slipped something in." His gloves creaked as he crossed his arms. "Anyone?" Lady Evelyn snapped, her fan snapping open again. "This is my home, not a den of murderers." Her feathers trembled, wax still smudged on the edge. The room erupted, voices overlapping, accusations flying. The foxman pointed at the green man. "You were by the fire, skulking about." The crimson woman shot back. "And you were hovering over the drinks." Miss Marple stayed quiet, her eyes on the girl in white. She'd gone pale, lips parted, but said nothing. A hand slipped into her pocket, quick, subtle. Hiding something or clutching it. The inspector roared for silence, but Miss Marple didn't need the noise. The dance had shifted, steps faltering, masks slipping. They accused each other, yes, but the gaps spoke louder. The ribbon, the mud, the feather in her sleeve. She glanced at the locked door down the hall, just visible through the open frame. Another piece, waiting, like the time young Billy lied about the broken gate. Everyone shouting, no one looking at the hinge. "Jane," Mrs. Bantry nudged her. "You're awfully quiet." "Am I?" Miss Marple murmured. "I'm only listening, Dolly. They're saying quite a lot." Chapter 9. The Broken Mirror. The shouting faded to a dull hum as Miss Marple slipped into the hall. The air here was cooler, tinged with wax and old wood. She paused by a gilt-framed mirror near the locked door. Its glass cracked, a jagged line splitting her reflection. The break was fresh, edges sharp, dust still settling in the frame. She tilted her head. Odd place for an accident. Her fingers brushed the wall beside it, catching a faint smear. Wax again, red like the seal on her invitation. She stepped back, her slippers scuffing the rug. Something glinted beneath. A shard of glass, small and curved, not from the mirror. A vial, perhaps. Footsteps clicked behind her. She turned slow and calm as the girl in white emerged from the drawing-room. Her lace mask hung askew, one eye bare and wide. She froze, hand still in her pocket. "Oh!" The girl's voice trembled. I didn't see you there. Didn't you?" Miss Marple's tone stayed gentle. "You've been out and about, haven't you, dear?" The girl's fingers tightened on her skirt, mud flaking free. "I needed air. It's all so awful." Her breath hitched, too. "Quick!" Miss Marple nodded, her gaze drifting to the pocket. "Awful, yes. Things break in a panic, don't they?" She gestured at the mirror, casual as a chat over tea. The girl glanced at it, then away. "I suppose. I didn't hear it shatter." Her voice wobbled, a note off-key. "No?" Miss Marple bent, retrieving the shard with a handkerchief. It gleamed, thin and fragile, a faint residue clinging to its curve, bitter, like the wine's scent. She tucked it away, her movements slow. Things happen quietly sometimes. The girl stepped back, her hem brushing the wall. A faint scratch sounded. Metal on plaster. Miss Marple's eyes flicked down. A pin peeked from the lace, bent and sharp, like the mark on the locked door. "I should go," the girl muttered, turning too fast. She vanished toward the terrace, her steps uneven. Miss Marple straightened, the shard a cool weight in her pocket. The mirror stared back, its crack splitting Lord Blackthorn's portrait across the hall. His stern face seemed halved, one eye watching, the other blind. She traced the wax smear again. A message, perhaps, scrawled in haste, or a mark left behind, like the time Mrs. Finch smeared jam on the pantry door, swearing it was an accident. Clues hid in the smallest slips. Voices rose from the drawing-room. The inspector, sharp and impatient. She didn't hurry back. The vial, the pin, the wax, they clicked together, soft as knitting needles. Not the whole pattern yet, but close. A breeze sighed through the terrace doors, carrying the scent of wet roses. She glanced that way, then at the locked door. The girl knew something, and this mirror, it hadn't broken by chance. Chapter 10. The Final Unmasking. The drawing-room glowed dim, the chandelier flickering as Miss Marple stepped inside. The guests stood clustered, masks askew, faces taut under the inspector's glare. She moved to the fireplace, her shawl brushing the mantel, and set her teacup down with a soft clink. The shard and feather rested in her pocket, silent witnesses. "Enough of this," the inspector snapped, notebook slapping shut. "Someone knows who he was. Out with it!" Silence stretched thin as a thread. Miss Marple lifted her cup again, the porcelain warm against her fingers. "Curious thing about wine," she mused almost to herself. "It hides so much, doesn't it? A bitter edge, say, like almonds." The woman in crimson stiffened, her ribbon fluttering. What's that supposed to mean? Miss Marple's eyes met hers, calm and steady. Only that someone knew how to mix it. Carefully, too. A chemist, perhaps, or a doctor. She glanced at the man in green velvet, his gloves still pristine. "Phew," shifted, jaw tight. "I'm no doctor. You've got nothing on me." "Haven't I?" She sipped her tea, then set it down. "That feather, though, it fell from your sleeve. White, like the girl's lace. You were near that locked room, weren't you?" The girl in white gasped, her hand flying to her pocket. The pin glinted as it slipped free, clattering to the floor. All eyes turned. Lady Evelyn stepped forward, voice sharp. "Miss Marple, this is absurd. Is it?" She turned to the inspector. The cane by the body. It scratched the rug. A thread caught there, black, like her ribbon. She nodded at the crimson woman. "And the mirror in the hall, broken with wax from your fan, Lady Evelyn. A warning, perhaps." The room froze. The fox-masked man's cigarette case clicked, forgotten in his hand. Mrs. Bantry gaped, sherry glass trembling. Miss Marple continued, soft as ever. "He wasn't a stranger. That scar on his hand. Old Lord Blackthorn's brother, I'd wager. Banished years ago. Back for revenge, wasn't he? But someone recognized him." The girl in white crumpled, sobbing. "I didn't mean to. He grabbed me, said he'd ruin us all." "Quiet," Lady Evelyn hissed, but her fan fell, wax smearing. The hearth. The man in green lunged for the door. The inspector barked, and a constable tackled him. The crimson woman sank into a chair, her mask slipping to reveal pale, pinched features. Miss Marple stepped back, her cup empty now. "He poisoned the wine, thinking to settle old scores. But you three, you locked him in that room, didn't you? Then staged the fall. The vial broke the mirror when you panicked." The inspector stared, then nodded slowly. "We'll check the room and the wine." "Do," she said, folding her hands. "It's the little things, you see. They always tell. The masks came off one by one, faces bare under the flickering light. The girl wept, the green man cursed, and Lady Evelyn stood rigid, her sapphire feathers drooping. The portrait glared down, its stern eyes blind to the end. Miss Marple turned to Mrs. Bantry. "I think we've had enough dancing, Dolly. Shall we go?" The night swallowed the manor as they left, the wind tugging at her shawl. The pattern had clicked, quietly, neatly, as it always did.